Hey guys, I recently made this animation that I entitled Circus. And through creating this video, it reminded me a lot of why I love animating and editing in After Effects. And also, it gave me a lesson that I think can be applied to any artist in any field. So when I'm animating in After Effects, one of the first questions I ask myself is, what do I want to create? Sometimes there's a client who asks for a specific thing, but in this case, I actually saw a tattoo on somebody that was like this cool, abstract, kind of minimalistic line drawing, and it made me feel like there should have been motion. It made it feel like there's motion in this tattoo drawing without there being any motion at all. So naturally, I wanted to bring real motion to a type of drawing like that. And the first thing I did is I drew out what I wanted to animate on 2 pieces of paper, which I unfortunately lost. You guys weren't missing much. It was not great art. It was just a shitty drawing that kind of mocked up what I think I could maybe put into After Effects. So that was what I wanted to create. And over time, I started implementing all the different things in my drawings and all the different ideas for motions in that drawing into After Effects. And this is part of what I love about After Effects. There's no one right way to do something. After Effects gives you a variety of tools to get from point A to point B. And the more that you invest in After Effects, or in any particular art form, the more tools are at your tool belt. So I'll give a quick example. There's a wavy effect on the water that's coming from the nozzle in the video. How I achieved this effect was drawing 2 straight lines and then applying the wave warp effect and a turbulent displacement effect onto the 2 lines. I was able to define the wave warp's height, its amplitude, and its frequency, all within the effect, and the turbulent displacement was just to make a little bit of imperfection within that wave warp. But this was not the only way that I could have done this. For example, I could have drawn the 2 lines, created a bunch of different path points on each of the lines, created a curve on each of those path points, and then manually went back and forth with the paths, copy and pasted those keyframes, and I would have had a pretty similar but also different effect. Another way I could have done it is I could have drawn part of what I wanted as the wave, and then I could have added a repeater to that path, and then repeated it downwards, and then making a mask around the area that I wanted it to be contained in, so that the water could just keep flowing down endlessly. Okay, that's 3 other ways that I could have achieved the same effect, and there's actually a lot more, and there's a lot of effects that actually do the exact same thing within After Effects. And what's great about After Effects is there isn't really a wrong way to do it either. It all depends on what the effect you want, and also what your particular style, what your workflow is. So if you wanted to use 0 effects, you could have avoided the wave warp, but also I didn't care. The wave warp wasn't going to affect my final project, so I was like, okay, this seems like the easiest one for me. Doing this actually really helps me stay motivated in a project. It's nice to be able to zoom into individual parts of what I want to create. So a lot of this recent project was shape layers, and a lot of them didn't move at all, so I just drew them in and then they just existed on the project. And then the other side of the project was a lot of moving parts, and with that part of the project, I was able to do things one by one, and that way it was a lot less overwhelming. I was like, okay, I'm going to do the waterfall now. Okay, waterfall's done. Now I'm going to do this dropping little ball. I'm going to draw out the motion. Okay, ball is done. Now I have to add little bubbles for the ball. Now I have to make these circles scale up. I want to make them scale up in the perfect motion. Okay, I'm just going to configure that. All these little small things make up this big project, which may seem overwhelming at first. So I have one more example from this video that was kind of a little neat workaround that I used that other people may have done something completely different for. So I have this square that's kind of a little Tarzan square. It has vines that it keeps shooting off of different things. and then it swings from object to object, and at one point it swings through the little waterfall that I talked about earlier. So you guys know how I created this waterfall, but I had a problem. I wanted to make water come out of the waterfall. I wanted to make it look realistic, like this square was really moving through the water, not just past it or behind it. I wanted to give the water life. But also, given my previous choices of creating it with a wave warp and creating it with two solid straight lines without altering the paths at all, I had a bit of a tricky problem. I didn't know at first how I was gonna get through this. I created a mask right where the square would go through the waterfall, and then I drew out shape layers to connect with where the mask left off on the line to create a more realistic looking water break. Now this took a lot of different shape layers, and I was almost frame by frame animating the individual water particles as the square went through the waterfall. And then eventually I had the mask close as the water would eventually get back to normal, and with that I had the animated lines that I drew on top of the waterfall connect back together until it was seamless and it was no longer visible at all. You could have handled this in a lot of different ways. I could have actually even hopped into Adobe Animate to do that hand by hand keyframing, and maybe it would have looked a little bit better, but it would have taken a lot more time to do that within a different whole program. But I think that's the three things you should keep in mind when you're animating or when you're doing any art. Number one is, how can I get this to look as good as possible? How can I do this to make it look the most realistic, the most good? I want it to look exactly as I envisioned. Number two, you should keep in mind your time. If you're working for a client especially, sometimes it's worth your time to do that extra step if that's something that they are especially interested in. But other times the client won't even notice, so maybe it's better to just do it the easier way. Also, lots of audiences aren't trained on this, and with this video it was more of like a throwaway video, so I didn't really want to take the time to go into Adobe Animate and redo that whole hand-drawn animation sequence. And the third thing is, how is this going to affect you down the line in your art? Does this fit within the full vision of what you want to do? So one of the downsides of creating a wave warp and a turbulent displacement effect onto that waterfall is, if you zoom in, you can see it's lower quality than the rest of the shape layers around it. Also, having a wave warp effect on the waterfall actually made it harder for me and gave me less options down the line when I did want to break through the water. I didn't know initially I wanted to have a little Tarzan square break through the water, but these are things that happen to me all the time while I'm animating. So making a project that's easy to work on down the line is great. You need to build up the base, the foundation of your animation for it to be able to go as high as you want it to go. But for me, I didn't want it to go that high. There wasn't that much complexity, so it wasn't that big of a deal for me that I did add this effect to it. So how can you apply this to your art? So I think these principles of problem solving is core to any artist making their art. A lot of art is having the creative ideas to do something amazing. But another big part of art is executing those ideas. And through executing those ideas, you do so much problem solving. It's all about getting from point A to point B. So if I'm a painter and I need to create purple paint, I can make it by mixing red and blue, but I also can make it by mixing a variety of colors if I don't have access to just red and blue. But I only know that by investing in the craft of painting and in the craft of probably color theory, among other things, to be able to know that there are other workarounds to this problem. So I'll leave off this video by encouraging you guys to keep investing in new tools. Even if you found a way that works for you in whatever your art field is, keep investing into different tools. This is something that I think I need to do a lot more of too. Sometimes it's really easy to get comfortable with one way that works and you can create something that looks really good. But what happens when you're in a different situation? Are you going to get stumped? And the other thing is, enjoy the process. Art is so fun. It's one of probably the best things on earth. So keep being creative and happy creating.